My guest is my good friend, Brandon Tatum. Brandon is a former police officer, author of a book called Beaten Black and Blue, Being a Black Cop in America Under Siege. I mean, you are a former cop. You know what's going on in the streets. And Black Lives Matter is getting people killed. Give me your take on the Black Lives Matter movement and the damage it's done.
What has Black Lives Matter actually done for black people? You've seen the degradation of the community, you've seen the destruction of communities, you've seen them advocate and make money on the dead bodies of black men, but they haven't supported their families.
The number one reason we're having basic problems in the black community is the large number of black kids enter the world without a father married to the mother.
You know, we have let our responsibilities go by the wayside. We have allowed leadership to fade from men in this country, not all of us, but to a lot of men in this country. Therefore, our communities are lost. You know, I would be nowhere without my father. My mama did a tremendous job, but seeing my father work hard every day, my father holding me accountable, seeing a man that looks like me actually accomplishing great things gave me hope.
Brandon, how are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing well, Larry. I'm doing even better now that I'm on your show. So.
Oh, man, please. Brandon, where do we start? Last time you were here, you said that someday you hope to have a place like mine. Brandon, you are blowing up on social media. I'm going to move in with you.
Yeah, now, God has blessed me a lot. And it's funny that I projected that because that's something that I aspire to be like and the type of, success that I aspire to have. And God has blessed me, so whenever you're in Arizona, you could come out here. We got a guest house for you.
That sounds good. Brandon, I was just reading a big data analysis on the Black Lives Matter movement. And how it started on this whole lie that the police were engaging in systemic racism. As a result, cops are pulling back and black guys are getting killed. And the guy that wrote it is named Zach Kriegman. And one of the things he says that's a problem is that nobody's listening to black conservatives, like Glenn Loury, like Thomas Sowell, like Walter Williams, like you. I mean, you are a former cop. You know what's going on in the streets. And Black Lives Matter is getting people killed. Give me your take on the Black Lives Matter movement and the damage it's done.
Well, I think, when you look at any movement, you got to look at the foundation of the movement to see where the movement is going to go. And it's founded by, women who I don't believe have the best interests of the black community at heart. I mean, they're proclaimed Marxists. They believe in destroying the nuclear family. I mean, all of those things are foundational issues that's going to cause a lot of problems, which we see in the future. I mean, think about it. What has Black Lives Matter actually done for black people? You've seen the degradation of the community. You've seen the destruction of communities. You've seen them advocate and make money on the dead bodies of black men, but they haven't supported their families. Michael Brown haven't gotten any money. George Floyd's family haven't gotten any money from the money that was raised by Black Lives Matter. So to me, I think that in theory, it sounds good to support black people, to support, young black people in the inner city, support black businesses. It sounds good in the theory, but the application of Black Lives Matter isn't even close.
Ronald Reagan saw it 40 years ago. Massive inflation that we haven't seen since today. In his own words, inflation is as violent as a mugger, as frightening as an armed robber, and as deadly as a hitman. And right now, your retirement accounts are under attack thanks to the inflationary policies of this administration. If you've not yet called Birch Gold, the only people I trust to help you diversify your 401ks and IRAs into gold, then you are missing the boat. Actually, you're treading water without a life vest. Birch Gold has your life vest. Let them help you convert an IRA or 401k into a tax-sheltered IRA in gold. With thousands of satisfied customers and an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau, you can trust Birch Gold to help protect your savings. Just go to birchgold.com/Larry right now to get a no-cost, no-obligation info kit. This comprehensive 20-page guide reveals how gold and silver can protect your savings and how you can buy them under the umbrella of a tax-sheltered account. So, do it right now. Go to birchgold.com/Larry. That's BIRCH gold.com/Larry.
I'm looking at, Brandon, the murder rates now in Chicago. They're on track for more homicides than any year since 1994. The city is a third black, a third white, a third Hispanic. 80% of the homicides are black on black. Baltimore, on track for record homicides. Philadelphia, on track for record homicides. St. Louis, same thing. Almost 90% of the homicides, black on black. Recently, out here in LA, where I am, a 14-year-old girl, I think she's from Chile, was in the dressing room when a bad guy was in a store called a Burlington Coat Factory, beating up people with a tire, a bicycle rack, and a lock. He was hitting people. Police show up because they assume that shots had been fired. That's what they were told. So the bad guy is there, doesn't surrender. They shoot at him. A bullet skips the floor, goes through a papier-mâché wall, and kills a 14-year-old. She's killed. Out comes Al Sharpton to give the eulogy. Ben Crump, that lawyer who represents a lot of these families that have been victimized by the police, allegedly, invited Sharpton out. He gave the eulogy. A couple of days ago, a 19-year-old cashier at a Burger King in East Harlem murdered by some thugs. And I tweeted, I wonder if Al Sharpton is going to do the eulogy for her. Oh, wait a minute. She wasn't killed by a white cop, so it doesn't matter.
Yeah, that's the most accurate depiction of what's going on that I've heard. You know, Al Sharpton and all of these other people are race hustling. That's all they do. If it's juicy enough, if it's going to get them clicks, if it's going to make them money, they will show up. But as you alluded to, look at all of the young people that have lost their lives in the inner city around the country. I mean, we're talking thousands. Over the course of 10 years, we're talking tens of thousands of people. And there was a number that I looked up when Barack Obama was in office, his 8 years in office, the number of the death toll of black people in the inner city surpassed the death toll of men and women who are fighting in Afghanistan and Iraq. These numbers are astronomical. There was a study that I looked at, and they tried to fact check it. Colonel Allen West came up with the idea, or at least he alluded to this fact, but it's very troubling. There is a number that suggests that in a 6-month period to a year period, there is more black men, mostly men, that are murdered around the country than the entire legacy of lynching in this country. And if you look at the numbers, the 86 years, I think 86 or 87 years of lynching, there was about 4,300 black men recorded who were lynched. You see more than that in a half a year in the inner city around our country. So these numbers are very troubling. And you would expect these black leaders, the people who claim they love black America, they love our black children and black women and men, and they're so supportive, that they will show up for some of them as well. They don't get a t-shirt. They don't get a mention. They're not even on Black Lives Matter social media. It is out of control at what they pick and choose to support.
Brandon, I was invited by the then coach, Urban Meyer of Ohio State, to speak to his football players. They had brought in a Black Lives Matter person about a month before, got everybody all riled up. So I came out and I went over all the data. I said there are more unarmed whites killed every year than unarmed blacks. The police kill 500 whites every year. Around 250 blacks are killed. Almost all of them were resisting violently or resisting with a weapon. And I mentioned again the stat about unarmed whites. And I said the police kill more unarmed whites than they kill unarmed blacks. And then I said, name one. And I dropped the mic, Brandon, and I just went like this. And the room was completely silent for 30 seconds. Nobody could name a single unarmed white that was killed, because when an unarmed white person is killed, no Van Jones, no Don Lemon, no CNN, no MSNBC hee-haw, which I call it. They don't care. They're just dead flies. But if it's a black person killed by a white cop, in comes the troops.
100%. And that's the troubling fact there, because I wish that we would just care about any level of injustice. It doesn't matter if you're black, white, or Hispanic. If a police officer does something that's not just, does something that's illegal, we all should be outraged and we should all hold them accountable. You can't just pick and choose, because it gives this facade. You know, I was with PragerU, and we were talking, me and Will Witt was talking to people on the streets in LA. And we had asked them, how many black people do you think get murdered every year by the police unarmed? People were saying thousands.
Right.
I mean, they were saying thousands of black people. Some person said like 6,000 black people a year by police. And when I did the research, and I think that in LA at the time, there was only like one black person that was shot unarmed that entire year. And you're like, how do you get a 6,000 number when it was only about 1 or 2 black people that have died that year unarmed, murdered by police? That tells you that the rhetoric that's being pushed It's literally deceiving people
Absolutely.
into having unjustifiable fear against police and also unjustifiable hatred, which precludes black people from even joining the police department and being a part of the solution and supporting their law enforcement in their local areas. So it has residual effects that are negative towards the black community when people come out and be disingenuous and lie.
Absolutely. I saw a poll that looked at people that were self-described as very liberal. 50% of them thought 1,000 black people were killed unarmed every year. 8% thought 10,000. And in 2019, it was 11, the whole country, Brandon, 11, the whole country. Half of self-described very liberal people thought it was 1,000. 8% thought it was 10,000. Just a little off. I mean, honestly.
Ooh, that's troubling, and that tells you what's going on in our education system. That tells you what are our activists actually doing, and it gives more credence to individuals like you and I to go out and continue to preach the truth. I guarantee you that football team, they had never heard the stats like that. And when before I heard you, when I was more on the left side thinking I was a Democrat, when I heard you just completely destroy Dave Rubin and his ideology on his show, it blew my mind. I said, well, wait a minute. I can't resist or deny the facts. I'm going to have to reconsider the things that I believed. I'm going to have to go and do my research because this brother just put out facts that's irrefutable at this point. And so I think it's invaluable that we teach these young people. These are formidable years for young men, especially on a football team. I was a football player. I played college football. These are formidable years. These young men are the future. They're going to go out and potentially some of them are going to play in the NFL and become leaders. Some are not. They're going to leave with a degree and be in the workforce with a lot of, valuable life skills that they've gained from being an athlete. And they're going to lead people one day. And you want them to be knowledgeable when leading, and you want them to have freedom to understand that you don't have to fear the police. We don't live in a racist America anymore. And so you can go out and flourish and be the best version of yourself. And I'm glad that they gave you an opportunity to do that. I wish that we could, have more of an in HBCUs and other places so the truth can be told.
Brandon, and when I give these stats, when you give them, we get this grief on social media. We're called Uncle Toms. We're called sellouts. We're called all sorts of things that we can't say on our video call right now. And I always tell people, isn't this good news? Isn't it good news that whatever is going on is not because of systemic racism, not because there's some sort of plot to get us? Isn't that good news? And therefore it means it's something that we can do, something we can do something about, something that we can correct. The number one reason we're having basic problems in the black community, as you well know, Brandon, is the large number of black kids who enter the world without a father married to the mother. And forget about elder. Barack Obama once said, a kid raised without a father is 5 times more likely to be poor and commit crime, 9 times more likely to drop out of school, and 20 times more likely to end up in jail. We can do something about that by reversing the welfare state, which I've always argued incentivizes women to marry the government and incentivizes men to abandon their financial and moral responsibility.
Yeah, and I think that also goes to the pro-life, pro-choice argument as well. Is I feel like that in addition to what you just said, the pro-choice argument or the pro-choice movement allows men to abandon their responsibilities as well, because all you got to do is leverage or convince or coerce a young lady to go get an abortion because you're not ready. You were ready to lay down, but you weren't ready to be a father. But I think that men need to take responsibility. You lay down and make the baby, you need to take care of that child. And I think that all of this is on the men. We have let our responsibilities go by the wayside. We have allowed leadership to fade from men in this country, not all of us, but to a lot of men in this country. Therefore, our communities are lost. Our churches are lost. Some of these churches are being run exclusively by women. And there's nothing wrong with women running the churches, but I believe that men have a responsibility to lead. That is our God-given position, to lead. And when we don't lead, we leave our families desolate and leave our families in a state of desperation and confused and lost and not financially stable. And this is just my opinion based on my life experience. I would be nowhere without my father. My mama did a tremendous job, but seeing my father work hard every day, my father holding me accountable, seeing a man that looks like me actually accomplishing great things gave me hope. A lot of times people say, well, when we see black people in leadership positions, it give black people hope that they can do something greater, that they can become a doctor, a lawyer. No, when you see your dad, when you see your father, who you share a DNA with, do successful things, it gives you hope. It gives you encouragement. Your father shows you how to be a man, how to treat a woman, how to be married, how to be successful. And I think that we are struggling in that position. One, because of the music that is out here, rap music. I just made a video about the baby who's a rapper, and he's literally pouring water on a black lady and talking about all these nefarious, nasty things that he want to do to her. And these are things and images that we do not need to have in our community. And like you alluded to before, Larry, that I'm glad that it's not the white man's foot on our neck. I'm glad that white supremacy and all of these things aren't holding us back. Therefore, we have life. At the end, we have light at the end of the tunnel. We can improve this thing. The boogeyman is not holding us down. We can wake up every day, get out of the bed, and say, look, today I'm going to make better decisions. Today I'm going to be what I always wanted to be, because there's no such thing as this white supremacy that's holding me back. So right. It's encouraging, and I hope that other men can see how encouraging it is, and the ability that we have to be successful moving forward.
You know, Brandon, you know who agrees with virtually every word we just said? Barack Obama. You know he does. Barack Obama, before he became president, at a church, black church, and he said, the Moses generation, referring to the generation of MLK, has gotten us 90% of the way there. And then he said, my generation, the Joshua generation, has to get us that additional 10%. He gets into the White House, what do we get? The Cambridge police acted stupidly. Racism is in our DNA. He embraced the Black Lives Matter movement. He invoked Ferguson when he was giving a speech before the United Nations. He said, if I had a son, he looked like Trayvon. He picked up the race card, invited Al Sharpton to the White House over 80 times in his second term. He knows it's BS. We know that because he wrote a whole book about the angst over not having a father.
Yeah, and it's interesting that he would go down that path. It's saddening that men like Barack Obama don't have enough, courage to stand up for what's true. He could have changed America forever.
Absolutely.
He was the first black president, which I think proved that America is beyond, we're post-racial. White and black people, Hispanic, Asian, all voted in majority to elect President Barack Obama. He could have changed it all. He could have spoke life to these young black men and say, right, you could be in this position if you work hard, if you do the things I did, get an education, work hard. Even if you come from a background where your father's not present consistently, where you come from, maybe a place of adversity, you can still go on and get a great education and be the president. Unite people together. Go to these communities. He could have changed Chicago. He did nothing to change the violence in Chicago based on everything that I've read. He had an opportunity. What a miserable and unfortunate circumstance that we had a smart, articulate, he was very charismatic. We had a president that represented Black America pretty well, I guess at face value, that literally dropped the ball, and he actually made race relations in this country worse. I wish that things would have been different.
He sure did make them worse. And I'll tell you, the golden opportunity he had was shortly after he got elected, Brandon. His good friend, Henry Louis Skip Gates from Harvard, is on vacation, comes back home to his home in Cambridge, forgets his door key, and he breaks into his own house with the taxi driver, and the neighbor doesn't recognize him as belonging to the house, call 911. Don't you want your neighbors to do that? Cop shows up, white cop, very polite, and says, respectfully, sir, would you come out of the house and give me ID to make sure you belong to the house? What did Gates say? I'll come out if your mama tells me to come out, something like that. The cop ultimately arrests him briefly, and what Barack Obama should have said was the following. Last night, I called my friend Skip Gates. He's known him for a long time. They're friends. And I said to him, Skip, please, you're a tenured professor at Harvard. All these black young men, some of them are being shot because they are resisting arrest. If they complied, we wouldn't have had the problem. And here you are, a tenured Harvard professor, and you're telling a cop, I'll come out if your mama tells me to come out? What are you doing? And I told him to knock it off. That's what Obama should have said. And I'm telling you, Brandon, that would have changed everything. Instead, what did he say? The Cambridge police acted stupidly.
I wish, and you made an incredible point there, Larry. I wish that more black leaders will step up and say, and talk about the elephant in the room. We need to stop resisting arrest. We need to teach our young people how to, communicate with police. And let me not be deceived or be naive to this. There are some young men that we can teach. There are some young men that need to hear the message to say, listen, you shouldn't resist. You don't have a reason to be afraid of police. Have your registration, proof of insurance ready to go. Right. Don't always treat every police officer as if they're the same. You know, I mean, you may have had a bad interaction. Treat this officer differently because you want him to treat you differently. There are some people out here that are knuckleheads. They're committing heinous crimes. They're convicted felons. They don't want to go back to prison, and they're going to fight for their lives to not go back to jail and attempt to kill police officers in many of these situations. So those are two different categories, but the young people that we can save, the young people who are open to hear, we do need to call this behavior out. Michael Brown would still be alive if it wasn't for him resisting arrest. George Floyd would still be alive. Right. We can go down a list. Even Laquan McDonald, who was unjustifiably shot by police, he would still be alive if he wasn't running around with a knife in his hand, high on PCP, resisting arrest and taking police in a, you know, pretty much in a pursuit. I mean, all of these young men, I can't find one that if they hadn't have been resisting arrest or doing something violent against police, that they would still be alive. If we can hone in on that and teach our young people that principle, we'll see a better light and we'll see less young men being murdered.
You know, Brandon, and neither you nor I are saying that 100% of cops are angels. They're not. But we should deal with it on a case-by-case basis. It is rare for the police to kill anybody, let alone a black person, let alone an unarmed black person. What gets me, Brandon, is this business of systemic racism. Let's take Freddie Gray, Baltimore. He's the one that was in the police van, hit his head, and he died. Baltimore is roughly 65% black. City Council, 100% Democrat, majority black. The mayor at the time was black. The state attorney who brought the charges against 6 officers was black. 3 of the 6 officers were black. A judge before whom 2 of the officers tried the case was black. The Attorney General of the United States at the time, Loretta Lynch, was black. The President of the United States was black. And I'm reminded of what the comedian Wanda Sykes once said, how are you going to complain about the man when you are the man? I mean, come on, knock it off.
Yeah, it's crazy that they would even suggest that. But to the layman, to the person who's unaware, they probably think all these people are white because that's the narrative, that only white people are unjustified. No, they're all black. I mean, think about this, Larry. We talked about this a little earlier. Look at the inner city violence. Is it the Klan? Is it white supremacy? Is it the neo-Nazis? Is it racist Trump supporters? No, we are doing this to each other. Who are having these children out of wedlock? Who are not taking care of their responsibilities? A lot of black people are teaching in these inner city schools. We don't hold our teachers accountable in the schools. Many of these schools, the principals are black. I mean, we go down a list. Take personal responsibility for the love of God. We are responsible for the things that we do. We are responsible for the change. I wish that more people would have the mindset of Booker T. Washington and thinking that we have to be the example. We have to set the road. We don't need to be so much worried about being activists every day. Focus on what we can control and improve our own lives. And then all of that will work itself out. I feel like many times in these inner city conversations that we have or in the black community, people are so focused on what the white man is doing. They're so focused on what somebody else is doing. You have control in your own city. I saw a video of a Klans member, and I don't know if this was parody or not. It appeared to be legitimate. It was a Klans member that was they were doing an interview with him, and he said, we don't have to do the work anymore. We don't have to battle against black people anymore. All we got to do is put a bottle of liquor and some drugs or something in the community, and they kill themselves. They do it to themselves. We can take our hands off at this point. And unfortunately, as much as I don't like Ku Klux Klan members, unfortunately, he had a point that we are doing this to ourselves at this point.
You know, we were talking about the absence of fathers. You could argue that 3 of the most prominent black leaders, a term I don't particularly care for, in America are Jesse Jackson, Al Sharpton, and Louis Farrakhan. Jesse Jackson's mom was a teenage mother who got impregnated by the married man who lived next door. Jesse Jackson was raised in South Carolina. It was rare for a kid to be raised without a father. And he was teased. Jesse ain't got no daddy, Jesse ain't got no daddy. Al Sharpton had a nice middle-class life until his father abandoned the family, and then down to the hood he goes. Louis Farrakhan's mother was estranged from her husband, had a boyfriend, took back up with the husband briefly, got pregnant, and tried to abort Louis Farrakhan with a coat hanger. So you have these three prominent black leaders, and I'm not a shrink, I'm not a psychiatrist, but I would argue there's some angst there about their relationship with their father or lack of relationship with their father, and they could talk about this from the heart and talk about how important it is to have a father in the home. Instead, the white man, the white man, the white man.
Larry, there's no money in talking about having a father in the home. You know, as somebody gave me an analogy. They told me to look at a desk. If you have a hole in the desk, which is easier, to put a piece of paper over the hole or to replace or refinish the entire desk? It's easy to try to blame the white man. It's easy to do those things. It's very difficult, and it will be a challenge because this didn't just happen overnight. A challenge of restructuring the identity of the inner city in the minority community. There's going to have to be a change in ideology in the school system. When I was going to school, if you were intelligent, if you articulate yourself, or you tried to be smart, you made straight A's, you trying to be like a white man. My father told me that they treated him the same way. He used to play on this, they call it sideline kill, which was playing football in the middle of the street on concrete, tackle football. And he said everybody loved him. They always picked him to be on the team. But then when he came back with his report card with all A's and 1B, they didn't want him to play anymore because Bobby wanted to be white, is what they called him. So we have to fight to reimagine the way we look at education and also the way we treat marriage. A lot of young men are out here trying to live their best life, and they don't value marriage. One reason I would argue, with 70% children born out of 75% plus born out of wedlock, is that they don't know what it's like to be a father. They don't see that. And I'm going to give you this example, Larry. This is crazy. I have evidence of it. And I don't know why I felt this way, but this speaks to the consciousness of young black men in this country. I had a task in high school to write out my 5-year plan. So from 2005 to 2010, I had a 5-year plan. And one of the things that I said in this paper as a high school senior, I said I wanted to have a son and then marry my baby mama was the year after that. So having a child first and then marriage second. That, when I look back on that, I say, how confused was I that I felt like children and relationships come before marriage, that I wanted to marry my baby's mama. I didn't even see her as a wife first. I saw her as a baby mama first. Wow. That would later become a wife. That's troubling. And I would argue that a lot of young black men that grow up in these inner city communities are thinking the exact same thing.
You know, there are think tanks on the left, think tanks on the right, and they don't agree about a whole lot of things. But both of them agree, think tanks like the Brookings Institution on the left and the American Enterprise Institution on the right. You need to do 3 things to escape poverty. Number 1, finish high school. 1, presumably where you can read, write, compute at grade level. Number 2, don't have a kid until you're 20 years old. Number 3, get married before you have that kid. If you do those things, you will not be poor.
And I would add, stay out of the criminal justice system. You know, teach your young people to stay out of that, because I know some people that are my friends, some of which I grew up with, some people I've met through law enforcement that have a criminal record at 18, 19, 20. I mean, you get convicted of a felony at 20 years old, you're going to have a difficult time finding a job that you want. And so many of these young people result to selling drugs because you're going to work at McDonald's, which is nothing wrong with working at McDonald's, but it's an entry-level job, or you're going to make thousands of dollars, in a night selling drugs. So stay out of the criminal justice system as well is a factor in which will help you set up for your future. And even if you do find yourself in a negative spot, overcome adversity. In my opinion, God gives us or allows us to go through adversity to make us better. There is, I would argue that, Larry Elder, you had adversity growing up or had adversity in your life that made you who you are today. Ben Carson is another example of a man who had adversity growing up. I think his father wasn't there. His mother couldn't read from the things that I've read, but she knew the importance of education. And she helped them help him and his brothers become better men by forcing them to be educated and having discipline. But he had to go through that. He had to have adversity in his life to become the best neurosurgeon to ever live, potentially. So I think that if you are finding yourself in an adverse situation, embrace it. Come out of it on the other side being a better person than you were, and be able to give a testimony to other young men that you made it out so they can make it out.
One of my influences is the late economist Walter Williams, and he said exactly what you said about staying out of the criminal justice system. And he told me this. He said, no matter your circumstances, no matter the kind of cards that you're dealt, you have a moral obligation. It is your duty to pick up those cards and play them to the best of your ability. And if you do that, people will help you if they see that you're trying.
1,000%. I mean, my life is a variety of people who have reached out to help me, you know, some of which are black and many of them are white. I never forget when I was in college and I had a child out of wedlock. And this is why I argue and tell young men, don't do this, because it gives you a whole bunch of headaches that you don't need to have. So, but I had a child out of wedlock. However, I had a college degree, and a man named John, he came to me. His daughter played volleyball with my son's mom, so he kind of knew of me. And he decided to help me out. He decided to pay for my rent for a year. He decided to mentor me. He didn't have to do none of that stuff. This is a successful man who's he has to make millions of dollars, has his own private jet, all of that stuff. But he decided to reach out and help me. And to this day, we are still friends. We're still connected. But that man didn't have to do that to me, for me. You know, he's white and I'm black, right? The white supremacy, a white man holding you down. No, because I was a good young man, and I wanted to make something of myself, and I chose life, is what he told me. He said, because you chose life, I want to help you, you know, and he did. And I've learned that to be true throughout my entire life. If you want to be something in life and you work hard and you dedicate yourself, you're a man of integrity, you try to do the right things, there's a plethora of people that are waiting to help you, or waiting to give you a hand up, no matter what the color is. And I have to say this, and it could be proportionality, it could be demographics. More white people have reached out to help me in ways that are invaluable than I have with people that look like me. And if I was just reliant on saying, oh, I'm only doing black only, I'm only with the black man, I probably wouldn't have had as many opportunities. So people need to put that race stuff aside and say, look, I'm going to work hard, and I'm going to be open to opportunities from anybody who has integrity that want to give me opportunities or want to provide for me the access to take advantage of those opportunities. And I wish that we would get rid of this race thing and just open our eyes to these opportunities for ourselves.
Brandon, I think one of the reasons why you are being disproportionately helped by white people when you're coming up is because of your attitude. Your attitude didn't fit the script. Ebony magazine is not nearly as influential as it used to be, but at one time, every coffee table and every black house had Ebony magazine on it. And every year they would have a feature called the 100 Most Influential Black Americans. And every year, absent were Walter Williams. He's published probably about 10, 15 books. He had about 150 different media outlets in his syndicated column once a week. He was the first black man, to my knowledge, to be the chairman of an economics department of a non-historically black college. Not in there. Walter Williams, that David Mamet called America's greatest living philosopher, written over 40 books, absolutely brilliant, not in there. Clarence Thomas, one of 9 members of the Supreme Court, not in there as one of Ebony's 100 most influential black Americans. So you had the wrong philosophy. Those guys had the wrong philosophy, so they were completely ignored by the black community. People like you and me, instead of people saying, you know what, I'm not sure I agree with them, but at least let's hear them out, we're ostracized, we're shut down. I've been bottle capped on social media. I know you've been heard on social media as well. So the ideas aren't even getting out there because we don't fit the script.
You couldn't have said any better. I just went on to it's called, I forget the name of it now, but I went on to a panel, and Candace Owens did the panel the year before where she was, arguing with T.I. So I went on this panel. It's the Revolt Summit. That's what it is, the Revolt Summit. So David Banner was on the panel. The attorney Benjamin Crump was on the panel. A whole bunch of black people who they considered to be prominent leaders in the black community. They did me dirty. I was on there. They had me to represent law enforcement as a black man in law enforcement. I give an expression of what we need to do, how we can work with law enforcement. They booed me. They let David Banner come on and say that police officers came from slave patrols, which wasn't true. I wrote in my book that it wasn't true. I clarified it. They shut me up and said, you can't, we're not talking about police right now. And then they bash white people the entire time. I come back, they finally give me something to say after an hour of them just bashing white people in America and why black people will never be anything in life. and I come and say that this country belonged to us just like anybody else. Our ancestors, our forefathers fought that we may have a position here, not that we would abandon our own country. And they booed me. One of the solutions that I gave was that we should have police officers in the schools, not necessarily for just law enforcement, but for recruiting, to allow these young people to have access to a police officer so they can build relationships. They booed me. And even worse, when they uploaded this to social media, they deleted everything I said.
Wow.
They had not one word that I said on their YouTube channel when they published this actual panel live. It's like the same thing that people criticize when it comes to social media about people being shadow banned or whatever. They do that to us in our own communities.
Let me just leave you with this quick story, Brandon. Years ago, Geraldo had an afternoon show like Oprah, and I got invited on it. There was a guy named Andre Chico Brown who had committed a drug offense. He's selling crack cocaine, and because of the laws, he was going to go to prison for a long time. So they had a bunch of black people on to talk about how unfair this was. There's a local guy named Danny Bakewell. He's kind of a local Jesse Jackson type, and a bunch of other people like that, and they had me. So they went around to all of them. They all talked about how horrible this was. This man has committed this offense, and he's going to go to jail for a long period of time, how unfair it is, how unfair it is, how unfair it is. And they came to me. I said, you ought to go to jail. I said, you knew what you did was wrong. Whether or not you think the war on drugs should be fought as a criminal justice thing or a health thing is irrelevant. You knew what you did was wrong. You knew what the penalty was. You should do the time. And they wanted to kill me. The audience wanted to kill. Literally, I had to have security escort me out to my car. So about 2 years later, I'm on my radio show, and my screener says, Larry, there's somebody named Chico Brown. He says you were on the Geraldo show with him a couple years ago. He wants to talk to you. And I barely remembered it. And then I remembered. I said, okay, put him on. And he came on, Brandon. He said this, man, I was in prison, and every single day I said to myself, when I got out, I was going to track your butt down. I was going to find you. I was going to kill you. And I said that every single day. But little by little, I began realizing you were the only one who told me that I was responsible for my own decisions. You were the only one who told me the truth. You're the only one who treated me like an adult. And I just want to say thank you. I got out of prison. I'm now in a youth center, and I'm a counselor. And I just want to thank you so much for helping me change my life. I got his phone number. We became friends.
And that's awesome, because people criticize me, and I'm sure they criticize you as well, Larry, on the rhetoric that we spew or whatever. They want us to change our messaging, and it's like, no, that's not the approach. The approach is tell somebody the truth. And it's so many people. I just had Uber Eats. So and I don't mean to promote Uber Eats, but I had somebody bring food through Uber Eats the other day, and the kid came to my house and he recognized me, a black kid. He go, is that you, Brandon Tatum? And so I gave a conversation right outside of my house, and he said, when I first listened to you, I couldn't stand you. That is the most prominent response that I get from black people out of anything. When I first heard you, I couldn't stand you. And then after listening to you, man, you told the truth. You were honest. Everything you said was facts. And I changed. That's the reason why we stand firm on what we say, is because later on, that grown man came back to you and said, you know what? You told me the truth when everybody else was pandering. And that's the philosophy that I live by. I'm not going to kiss your rear end. I'm not going to tell you what you want to hear. I'm going to treat you like my father treated me and how I would treat my son. I'm going to tell you the raw truth, and the truth will set you free. All of this pandering and me telling you what you want to hear, these societal woes, that's not going to make you any better. You're just going to fall into the system. I'm going to tell you the truth, and it's up to you what you do with it. You'll believe it one day, or you reject it. That's the way I present, my message.
The book is called Beaten Black and Blue, Being a Black Cop in an America Under Siege. My guest has been Brandon Tatum. Brandon, thank you so much. It was great. Talk to you soon.
Thank you, Larry.
You got it.
Larry Elder here, and I've got some great news for you. If you're tired of the censorship in this country, then you're in luck. You can go over to epictv.com and watch honest programs that don't spin the facts. EpicTV.com is a brand new, no censorship video platform where you can watch not only my show, but other deep documentaries, great program, wholesome movies that you can watch with your entire family. So head over to epictv.com. I'll see you there.